What is going on? You have reached the Samplers Podcast here at thedreamsound.com, a weekly podcast where we speak about all things samplers. This is episode 3, covering the topic of buying a used sampler. Alright, so there's 3 main things that are pretty important if you're looking to pick up a used old vintage sampler. But let me step it back for a second. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for listening. We're happy you're here. Alright. So here are my 3 main things that I look at and don't deviate from when buying any used vintage sampler. Number 1, and this is a rule that I don't deviate from at all cost, under any circumstances. It's best to buy an older piece of equipment in the absolute best shape that you can get it in, regardless of the price. The better condition up front is a huge indicator of how well taken care of the sampler is and how many years you'll actually get out of it. It's a safer bet to spend the money up front on a solid sampler in very good condition than pay for repairs later on. Just one thing to know about this. Doing things this way takes a long time to do. There's been times when I've spent years in looking for the right piece to buy, and I've passed up a lot of samplers to get one that covered these requirements. And in the long run, it's been a choice that served me very well. All right, number 2, don't buy a sampler if you have not seen pictures of it. And not just any type of pictures at all angles, especially the back, because there can be a lot of damage back there. And if you see a listing with a picture that looks generic in any way, don't even touch it. Ideally, what you want is a seller who takes pictures close up and far away, and also takes the measure to take pictures of any cosmetic damage. And to take it a step further, it's even better if there's pictures with the sampler actually on. So you could actually see if there's any burnt out pixels or anything wrong with the display that would be automatically noticeable from a picture. So number 3, this one is huge, and I don't recommend you buy any vintage sampler without asking this question. Even if the seller lists in his description that the sampler is in mint condition, always send them an email or contact them in whatever way that they've provided and ask them if there is anything wrong with the sampler at all. By asking this, it causes the seller to actually go back and double check, and it also gets them to divulge anything that they may have become so used to using the gear that they actually forgot was a problem. And that happens when you have a piece of old gear and you use it enough and there's something wrong with it and you just keep on working around it. Eventually you forget that that problem's actually there because you've accepted it and you just kind of work around it. So by jogging the seller's memory, it will cause them to tell you more information about the sampler that will help you make a proper buying decision. And here's another thing. For those that own a lot of vintage gear, you'll know that there's always something wrong with vintage gear. In a lot of cases, old gear came out manufactured with flaws. So getting as much information you can about a purchase, especially if it's an expensive purchase, is the best way you can go. And if a seller tells you there's absolutely nothing wrong, trust me, there's always something with vintage gear. For the sellers out there on the other side of the deal, this doesn't mean that you're going to lose the sale. All a buyer wants to know is exactly what they're buying. It's not difficult to understand that there will be something wrong with gear that could be 20 or 30 years old, but there is something wrong with dishonesty in a transaction like this, especially when a lot of times there's not much repercussions you can take. Once you've sold something to somebody and they sent it to you, it's a real hassle to get them to reimburse you for something that isn't what you expected, right? So if you take all these 3 steps, you'll have a very enjoyable buying experience. Well, you always have to remember that after you acquire this gear, it doesn't mean it's new. It's already decades old. And if we take the steps to make sure that we can get the most out of it, you'll have a better time making music, which is the goal, right? Like that's the end goal in most cases. So those are my 3 steps. I don't break any of them. I go by the same rules every single time. And I've actually had more defects buying brand spanking new gear than I ever had buying old gear because of these steps. Unless you're somebody that can repair gear or knows extensively about the vintage sampler that you're buying, don't take the risk. Repair costs are insane. But anyway, thank you for joining us. Spend some time and look around our website. There's plenty of resources for sampler technology. This concludes episode 3 of the Samplers Podcast. We'd be happy to have you tune in on the next episode, but until then, Take care of yourself. Peace.